Hello, everybody, and welcome into the Cut to the Chase Sports Podcast, our Bengals Blitz here. I'm Chase Johnson. I'm joined alongside my good friend, Justin Lacey. It's been a minute. I feel like every time we hop on the podcast, we're like, man, it's been a minute. It's been a minute. Life just goes so fast. There's so many things that come through, and the next thing you know, the Bengals are making a lot of moves that are pretty good. And we're like, man, who the heck is this team? But Justin, thanks for coming on again.
Hey, man, it's definitely a pleasure as always. It's good to be on the show. You're right. It's been a long time now. However, last week you were on Running Through the Jungle, so we got a chance to cook up a little bit when it comes to our draft picks and whatnot. Give out some draft grades for those that's going to be listening to this show. Please give a rewatch to last week's episode where we kind of drop bomb some knowledge on some draft picks and give a little bit of overview of how the Bengals offseason went. But yeah, man, it's always great to be on the show with you.
And you guys can catch Justin over there Running Through the Jungle. Again, he always has that chef's hat on. We know a thing or two, man. It's that group kitchen. Hey, I mean, even at this time, my girlfriend's making some dinner too. So everybody just in this thing cooking. So that's our goal right now. But again, just to have the real nitty-gritty conversations about what's going on with our favorite team, the Cincinnati Bengals, it goes a long way. Everybody, you wouldn't mind liking, subscribing to the content, the video, leaving some comments down below about your thoughts and everything else. And, following Justin and I on Twitter or wherever the platforms are, if you guys are interested in that type of stuff, we really appreciate the support that has been going on over the last couple of years. But without further ado, let's get into, let's say, some house cleaning, all right? There were some things that happened over, the last week or so. The draft obviously was a big thing that happened about a week and a half ago. That came and went. A lot of things happened. But, in the Bengals lore, Myles Murphy, who was a 2023 first-round draft pick for the Bengals, his fifth-year option was declined. This was last week on April the 30th. It was declined by the club last week. Murphy and the Bengals, they're hoping to get an extension done, at least after the season, that is. With Myles Murphy getting his option declined, that would make him a unrestricted free agent going into the 2027 offseason. If accepted, Myles Murphy would have made $14.5 million in 2027. And yesterday in a Sports Illustrated article by Andrew Miller, Murphy said that he's here to play football and he loves his teammates and he's out there for the blood, sweat, and tears to go out there with my guys. Justin, I'll pitch it to you. How confident are we in Myles Murphy to really take that next step from the end of last season going into 2026, and what will he need to do to be worthy of an extension going forward?
I think I'll answer this question in a litany of different ways, but I think the first question I just want to ask you is, Chase, do you feel like that he deserved to get his fifth-year option picked up? Because here's my thinking. I'm hearing a lot of noise on Bengals Twitter community, wherever you're seeing all of the engaging with the Bengals fan base. It seems like that they're always loud about a topic about something. Mm-hmm. And now that we are fresh off of the Dexter Lawrence trade, we're fresh off of the draft picks. It just seemed like that there's something that we've pivoted towards as a fan base that the fan base has got to just talk about and be loud about. And most of the fans have been arguing about the Bengals needing to pick up the fifth-year option for Myles Murphy based off of what he did last year. So I just feel like, okay, you registered 5.5 sacks last year. Now I understand Trey Hendrickson was hurt, so it allowed you to open the door to that opportunity. But dude, let's talk about the couple of years before that. What have you done? And it's been a whole lot of nothing burgers. So let's say that Trey Hendrickson didn't get hurt. Would you have notched those 5.5 sacks then? Or would it just been like one here and then one there? And the next thing you know, the season ends and concludes, and you only have 2.5 sacks? I don't think that weren't a fifth-year option to be picked up. And I think what the Bengals are thinking is that, man, I want to see more. From a confidence scale, just to go into directly answer your question on that front. I am confident, like 8 out of 10 confidence, that he can replicate the production that he did on the back end from the back end of last year going into this season. But I don't want to lean on hope. And part of the discussion of why I'm so happy that the Bengals made the moves that they did this offseason is because I don't want to buy that hope as a strategy for that. Mm-hmm. I don't think he's earned the right to have a negotiated contract extension right now. I think that the Bengals have played it perfectly by declining the fifth-year option, not saying that they don't believe in the player, is because, yes, even at that price tag of $14.5 million going into next year, where it is a lot more salary implication that's going to be delved out to between the sporadic of players next offseason. Do you want Myles Murphy to be a part of that bucket right now that you got to fork load up that contract to? I don't think I'm ready to do that yet. And it's not saying that I don't want him to have him in my long-term plans. I just want to see a little bit more first. So I think the Bengals made the right call. It has nothing to do with the player. I think that this is the financial gymnastics of it. And I believe if I was sitting in the Bengals front office, I would have made that decision too. Now, that doesn't mean that I'd say that he doesn't deserve an extension. I do believe that he deserves an extension. I am confident that he will get an extension done. But let's say on the forefront of that, they just don't come to agreement before the season starts. And then the year plays out, and then they're left holding the bag of, what are we going to do? He did produce. Well, we're great. But at this point, I'm just like, we got a lot of bodies at the position. Yep. And this is not going to be a repeat of Trey Henderson. I would rather just get out in front of him and say, look, go get your bag, dog. We'll just take our comp pick later. But that's how I see multiple different avenues of way to approach. But at the end of the day, man, I feel like the Bengals handled it properly just to get it started.
I agree, too. I do. And to think about it, Myles Murphy, of his 5.5 sacks, 4 of those sacks came after the bye week last year. And you might look at the numbers of, yes, he had a sack against Pittsburgh. He had 2 against Baltimore in the home game. He had a sack against Arizona. And you're thinking the numbers, okay, it's only 4 sacks, whatever. You turn on the tape and you see the guy, he started to get more pressure on the quarterback. He started to collapse the pocket and everything else. I'm with you on everything, Justin, truly, in terms of what did he do the first 2 years? Not much at all. Obviously, it's going to be tough to overtake a guy like Trey Hendrickson's role after he went for 17.5 sacks back-to-back years. But on top of it, again, you got to be able to maximize the role you're playing in, and it just didn't seem like that was the case, whatever the situation might have been. Holding off and seeing what happens could be big because, again, maybe those 5.5 sacks, it could balloon into 9.5 or 10.5 sacks this year. Who knows if you see the whole production of play. Even if Myles Murphy's a guy that gets 8 sacks this year and he's not the leader in sacks, that's a pretty good problem to have. Mm-hmm. And the thing that you brought up on it being that we have a surplus at the position now. They went out and signed Boye Mafe for that $20 million deal from Seattle. They drafted Cassius Howell. They still have a first-round pick in Shamar Stewart, who we're looking to see what happens with him, and a lot of interior guys at that. So, again, the Bengals are trying to cycle through and see what they have at that position, and then they feel comfortable to the need of, yes, if something doesn't work out, we can move off and pivot. It's okay. But if something does work out in terms of Myles Murphy plays really well, then they're going to feel comfortable to say, you know what? Let's move some things around. Let's see how the season plays out. The Bengals, if they make the playoffs and everything else, and Myles Murphy plays a very pivotal role, then they can go on ahead and do it because then they can move money around and with guys like Dexter Lawrence. They have to get the DJ Turner deal done. They still, thinking about the whole Dax Hill thing on the defensive side as well. So there's a lot of things to look at, and then restructuring the guys on offense on top of that, a Chase Brown deal, of course. So there are so many things right there that they have to necessarily bring the pen and paper out to. Myles isn't one of those things right now. That's not a big deal. Not. Just let the kid play freely. That's the other thing about this. It's not that, it really does allow him to play this game freely this year. Mm-hmm. You can look at it from the standpoint of the fact that, it's a prove-it year, it's pressure and everything else. Well, I mean, he's going to be a starter. There's a lot of people at the position, sure. But if he's able to, make the necessary strides that he did last year and build on top of that, he's just going to play with a free mind and play football. You heard the quote. I mean, dude loves being with his teammates. He's here to play football. Just take what his word is. He's here to go sack the quarterback. If he's going to be able to do that and try to, build on top of his game, at least from last year's standpoint, then I think the Bengals made the right move. I couldn't agree more.
Dax Hill, DJ Turner, and Chase Brown. I believe that we are all in agreement that those are three guys that should be looked to get and extended. But you know what? The Bengals picked up Dax Hill's 5th-year option, and people were in question about that too. Like, well, he's been injured and stuff like that, and you're paying him. But what the Bengals was looking at it as that they were very thin at this position, and he did show some promise, and that they did warrant him to pick up that 5th-year option.
Mhm.
Now, this to be determined if they're going to be able to get the ability to extend him. The guy that should be getting the extension conversation first is DJ Turner, followed by Chase Brown to me, and then potentially Dax Hill, and then Myles Murphy, if there's even an option there to be able to get the extension done. If not, I'm okay with that.
Yep.
Because at the end of the day, you get first crack at it. Like you said, you are a starter. That means you get first dibs. You're up. Let's see what you can do. Can you repeat? Can you repeat the production that you did on the back 9 of the season last year? If the answer to that question is yes, we're absolutely into a great start. But if it's no, you got Boye Mafe right there. You also got Shamar Stewart. That's in the rotation. And you got Cassius Howell that you just drafted in the 2nd round. And to go about it like how you mentioned before regarding Myles Murphy's production and lack thereof because Trey Hendrickson is in place. Well, what have we been saying about Trey Hendrickson for the last 4 years? Is that he only is valuable on one side because he only rushes from that one side. Well, what about the other side? You telling me you couldn't get Sam Hubbard off the field? Come on. Like, this is what we're talking about. Diversify your portfolio with your pass rushes and your skills. Rush from both sides. Rush from a little bit from the interior. Now, I do believe that Myles Murphy has absolutely gotten better, but he's kind of coming on when it's a little bit too late. And we don't have time to wait. We're just in the period where it's like we're trying to win the championship now. And I don't know why. Chase, please answer this question for me because I don't get it. Because Bengals fans, again, they're loud and they're proud and they just want to bring every pitchfork in the argument. But when it comes to somebody being paid, like if somebody's entering a contract year, what have this team and what has these said players done over the last couple of seasons lately to make you feel like that the Bengals just need to rush to their doorstep to get a contract negotiation started? Now, I understand how the contract negotiation with Trey Hendrickson went. I understand how the contract negotiations with T. Higgins went, with even Jamar Chase, with Jesse Bates. I get it. You can bring a laundry list of some of those guys is that, they just always seem like it's pulling teeth. But I can also give you a ton of names that they gotten out in front of these contracts, namely Trey Hendrickson, and that they just did it. They got it done, and you didn't even think about it. Logan Wilson, Jermaine Pratt, guys like that, like they were part of the core, and they went out there and got them done. So what makes you think that after the piss poor defense that we saw over the last 2 years, maybe 3 years, I mean, if you ask me personally, the 2023 defense was bad. What makes you think that these players that are coming up into these contract negotiation windows, especially on defense, that they just feel like that they are entitled to get an extension done right now? Ain't nobody make no Pro Bowls. Ain't nobody putting up all pro numbers. So what makes you think that we need to just beat down the drum for guys like Myles Murphy to get an extension when he haven't even proven anything yet?
Yeah. I mean, exactly. You look at the result on the field, you look at the result in the numbers, and you go on ahead and look at the film, and you're like, you know what? What could have been? We don't need that anymore. Yeah. We need production. That's the big thing. Someone's got to fill in those shoes. Obviously, the Bengals went and got Dexter Lawrence from the interior, but Dexter Lawrence doesn't play all 4 positions on the defensive line. Someone's got to be able to fill that in on the edge rusher, and we'll see if any of those guys is able to do that at a very high level. Not everyone's Trey Hendrickson. We're not saying that everyone has to be Trey Hendrickson or a Myles Garrett or a TJ Watt. Those guys are in different leagues of their own. But I'll say it here. Those are some big shoes to fill. Myles Murphy is up next. It is his time to be able to take that next leap and try to get himself an extension. I saw a valuation of what the prediction was. I think it was in the Sports Illustrated article. 3 years, $55 million. Has anything that he has done at this moment warranted an $18 million per year valuation? Just to give you that, Boye Mafe makes $20 million a year.
Yeah, and I don't think that Myles Murphy has done anything yet to earn that contract right. And look at his draft class. There's other guys that the fifth-year option was declined. Some of them Myles Murphy is better than or has
Mhm.
production that you can see being better than in the future than the guys that were declined. But
Yep.
others are purely of a financial sense. I look at up in Detroit, they drafted a guy like they drafted a guy in Jack Campbell, linebacker, who's
Yep.
been majorly way more productive as a linebacker than Myles Murphy has been productive as defensive end.
Yeah.
And the Detroit Lions had to decline his fifth-year option just because financially it's going to be tough for them to meet that.
Yeah.
So, again, teams are battling through these. They're thinking of this from a strategic standpoint. Luke Van Ness, he's a guy that the Green Bay Packers just picked up his fifth-year option. The Steelers, they had to decline Broderick Jones' fifth-year option because he hasn't really produced and lived up to those expectations. He's been often injured and stuff. So, like, everybody's scenario is different. It's not, oh, well, you suck and we're just not picking up your fifth-year option. The Bengals have declined 3 fifth-year options in the past decade and a half, and that's Billy Price, that's John Ross, and that's Cedric Ogbuehi. Clearly, they actually overstayed those welcomes with all three of those guys. They should have moved off those guys before that fifth-year option decision even should have came up. But there has been times to where the Bengals made the smart move and had to pick up a fifth-year option because they just needed a body for the next year. They had no replacements. William Jackson comes to mind.
Yeah.
And I would not have picked up William Jackson's fifth-year option, but they did for the one season, only to find out that he was really overvalued as a corner.
Mhm.
There's a chance where Myles Murphy might fall into that bucket, or even Dax Hill, because I'm still looping him in that part of that conversation. To
Yeah.
where it's like, let this year play out. Let him
Yep.
go ahead and play freely, as what you mentioned, and then we'll revisit the conversation when it's time for it. I just want to play ball unless in that part of that contract talk.
Man, it's that desert of the offseason. And these conversations are always tough to have. Again, we're rooting for these guys. We're rooting for them to play well. Wish them
Absolutely.
nothing but the best. And we're obviously hoping that the Bengals play, great football this year and play late into the season. Now, to pivot off that, let's talk to our star. Let's talk about our star. We're not going to be able to talk to our star. He was at the Met Gala last night with Justin Jefferson and everything else with all the stars in the world. But word was coming around that there's a possible chance that a restructure could happen in Joe Burrow's big-time contract. He signed a 5-year, $275 million contract back a couple days before the 2023 season started. Since then, Joe has been injured quite a few times. Obviously had the full 2024 season where he just went nuclear, 43 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. It's actually funny when you think about that type of stuff, that over the course of 5 years, you've got some Ravens fans that'll mention, about Joe being made of glass, but him and Lamar Jackson have missed the same amount of games and everything else. But that's a conversation for another time that we have so much time in the offseason to go with that. But anyway, they're talking about, there could, if so many restructures happen on this Bengals roster, it could free up to $94 million, which again, do I think they're going to do that? No, I don't think. There's a lot of different ways that it can go, but so much gymnastics. We're not that flexible. I can't even touch my toes. But again, Justin, the list of other quarterbacks who have restructured this offseason, it goes by some of the big-time names in the NFL. Patrick Mahomes, he was able to free up $43 million for the Kansas City Chiefs over the course of the offseason. Look at what they did. They went and got Kenneth Walker, and then they traded some picks and everything else. They had a pretty good offseason to save for themselves. Josh Allen freed up $12 million. The Bills gone ahead and trade for DJ Moore. Lamar Jackson freed up $40 million in cap space, and they almost had Max Crosby, and now they have Trey Hendrickson and other pieces. Jared Goff, he freed up $40 million by some contract maneuvering and everything else. And Detroit, they still have a pretty good roster, to say the least. My big question is, it's an easy question. Should Joe do this? But what would the Bengals do with that extra money, and how would that allow them to play on that pivotal playground?
That is exactly the question that I was going to ask you, is that what are they going to do with the cash? Because look, they already made the big swing and they didn't need to restructure Joe Burrow to get it done. I think that fans just want to see it done because, again, this is one of those conversations that's really engineered by the fan base and then backed by the media because they wanted to ask those tough questions at the podium. Now, it is refreshing to see that Duke Tobin, when he gave that presser, that they're not shying away from it and they're not just closing the door on the opportunity that can be a discussion that can be had and something that can come down the pipe. But if it's needed, my question is it really needed? Because, yes, while it sounds good, the Bengals haven't really done this before. it sounds good to be able to see the ding, the notification bell come across the ticker and says Joe Burrow agreed to a restructure on a contract that free up such and such $1 million in cap space, and Bengals fans are going to lose their mind. Like, oh my gosh, yeah, we finally did it. Hey, what are we doing with the extra money that we freed up? You had mentioned those 3 other quarterbacks before, well, 4 that they agreed to restructures. But my question is, why did they have to do that in the first place? Is because, well, let's start off with Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes had already agreed to restructure 2 years ago, and their roster is depleted of assets, and because they kept kicking the can down the road. So what they had to do it one more time. Convert some of that cash into signing bonus, that salary cap into a signing bonus, so that way they can free up and get somebody else on the roster. They had to trade away Trent McDuffie because they knew they couldn't afford a guy like him. Yeah. Yes, they notched the first-round draft pick for him, but you don't do that if a guy like Trent McDuffie's caliber is something that you have in the long-term plans. But they had to do that because they had to make financial wave decisions, and they'd rather go the cheap route. The Buffalo Bills. Well, just last year, they just extended Josh Allen. This is his 3rd contract extension that he did, and he's making now $55 million a year tied with Joe Burrow. But again, what is their roster looking like? It was still coming off of the old Von Miller contract that was bad to begin with. Last year's defense really centered around you hadn't assigned a aging Joey Bosa as your pass rusher because really you weren't good at drafting them to begin with. And Matt Milano was still making a lot of money on your roster too. So, yeah, you had a lot of money tied up to that you kind of had to do that. Yeah, you traded and got DJ Moore. Or if you just would have drafted properly at receiver like Stephon Diggs' replacement, you wouldn't have been in the decision to begin with. The reason why you had to do that was because you failed at drafting Stephon Diggs' replacement by drafting a guy like Keon Coleman instead of staying in your spot and drafting Xavier Worthy. Okay. So with that being said, there are reasons why the decision is being had. And for Lamar Jackson, I know that he had agreed to restructure. It sounds good in theory. That roster is loaded, but they also have bad contracts tied up to Roquan Smith, Marlon Humphrey. Those are untradeable contracts. Now, they're still good players and productive, but Kyle Hamilton has to sign an extension. And Lamar Jackson is still on the fence of signing another extension. Okay, so like these decisions are not made in-house just because they want to do it because it sounds cool in theory. We've seen the Cleveland Browns had to restructure Deshaun Watson's same bad, fully guaranteed contract for 4 years now. And this is in the final year of it, and it's gotten them nowhere. And Jared Goff, I didn't even know about his restructuring until you brought it up. But the thing is, though, if you're all in about winning now this season, this upcoming season, I'm not talking about future years.
Yeah.
What is restructuring Joe Burrow's contract going to do when that money is going to be pushed into next year's cap space and also in 2028's cap season?
Yeah.
Who are you going to get right now that's going to make the team better? You can say linebacker all we want, Bengals fans, but let's be honest here. What linebacker out there are you going to try to notch and grab? The only time you can probably do that at this point is try to trade for a player. And at that point, you got to give up something to get it. It's opportunity cost. Are you going to restructure Joe Burrow's contract just so that way you can get DJ Turner a long-term extension? Those guys are already on your team in 2026. So I guess what I'm saying is I don't know if it's really needed right now. But it's good to know that the option is there if the case the Bengals want to take advantage of it. But it has to be backed by some sort of move, and a move that is going to improve the team even more gradually. Otherwise, man, we're just doing it just to appease the fans and the media.
Yeah, I think in terms of if they were to make that move, they could go out and, like you said, beating the drum of linebacker. I still think that they would benefit from getting a linebacker in that room just to go on ahead and help out the young guys and Knight and Barrett Carter and all. And again, I know the names have been tossed out there of Bobby Wagner, Bobby Okereke, Matt Milano. There's been a bunch of guys that have been tossed out there and everything else. And, I don't want to bring the whole, trade thing in there, but Jordan Brooks from Miami, first team all pro at 180 combined tackles, all that stuff, 2-time Pro Bowler. He's looking at a interesting looking contract, but that again, I mean, his valuation, per Sport Track, they do a really good job of all the numbers and stuff. When I'm confused, I go over there and look. But when you think about it, I mean, his valuation's around $18 to $19 million. That's a lot for a linebacker right there. But again, it just depends on what you're looking at. You carry over to next year, though, with the whole Burrow thing. If you carry over that $19 million in the next year and then you restructure some other guys, it starts freeing up even more space and everything else. And then you're like, you know what? We can go make another move again next year if we need to. I think the roster right now, I don't want to say it's like it's completely set. We're great and everything else, but the Bengals are in a completely better spot than they were just 2 months ago before free agency started. So right now, I mean, they've kind of they've played their cards very well, and that's something that we haven't really been able to say as fans over the last, our lives. But again, I don't know. This is a very interesting topic that brings up again. You can look linebacker. Maybe I know this is a very touchy one, but a receiver 3 for a year if you want.
Mm-hmm.
But there's options, Justin.
But you even said too, those moves that those sub at post draft, getting a couple of vets in, those little free agency moves. Does that really involve needing Joe Burrow to do a restructure this year to make that happen?
Exactly.
Look, we saw DeAndre Hopkins at Met Gala as well with Joe Burrow, and he was asked the question, what quarterback would you want to play with? He said Joe Burrow. Hey, if you get him under a contract, a 1-year deal, is it really going to break the bank? No. Yeah. Same thing if you were to go after a Bobby Okereke or a Bobby Wagner. Bobby Wagner probably might cost you $10 million, whatever, but he's a guy that was way past his prime. He's still somewhat productive and still a good player in this league, but is he somebody that Joe Burrow got to come in and restructure a deal for? Probably not. You mentioned Jordan Brooks and his contract is with the Dolphins, but the Dolphins have also had to shed a bunch of dead cap. They're probably the largest dead cap salary in the league by the Tua cut and all the other ones. They had to trade away Jalen Waddle. They notched 3 draft picks from him, so not even going to hate on that. But that Jordan Brooks contract probably wasn't even a good contract to begin with from the Dolphins. So again, I just feel like that if we were talking about this next year, like this year after the move that they made, let it go and come and go, and then next year we're talking about Joe Burrow restructuring potentially because you're trying to go after another important piece, or you got to make some moves a little bit more differently. I get it now at that point because next year is going to tie up. You're going to have some financial decisions that you're going to have to make, but all it's going to equate to is a stressful 2027 offseason if you're restructuring Burrow now because you made a lot of good moves. Again, I just think like this whole thing is just engineered by the fan base because they have yet to see Joe Burrow restructure. But look, if you were to agree to restructure this year, you're not going to see me complain about it because I'm thinking that it's going to be backed by a subsequent move that's going to be made. Then next season, who's to say that Joe Burrow can't sign a 3rd extension?
Yeah.
And then eliminate that cap hits altogether because that's exactly what Josh Allen did. Josh Allen signed his first year. I think he signed his first deal after 2020. He signed like a 6-year deal or something like that. And then this past year, after he won the MVP, he just signed another contract over $300 million, making $55 million. So that way he can get into the upper echelon of top paid quarterbacks in the league. And Patrick Mahomes, remember, he signed that 10-year deal originally in 2020.
After the Super Bowl,
it's crazy people forget about that. Yeah. After he won that Super Bowl and COVID was on the threshold of hitting, he signed that 10-year contract. Yep. That contract was not going to expire until 2030. And obviously there's language in that contract that allows for multiple restructures and pivot because no one has never signed a contract that long before. It was unheard of and unprecedented. But we knew that Patrick Mahomes in 2030 is still going to be the quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs.
Exactly.
Joe Burrow is going to be your quarterback for 2027, 2028, 2029, and possibly 2030, and so on. You can get away with getting away with the restructure because at the end of the day, you're going to just extend him again anyway because we're still hoping that he plays at a high level. I think a lot of this is that, but it comes back to the same question. Is it really necessary right now at this point? We're doing it because we're saying this because there's still small, minute things that we can fix on this team just to make sure we feel great about the season. I already feel good about the season, bro. I feel good about the upcoming season to the point Joe Burrow ain't even got a restructure. And I would consider that a win this time than just a notch under the Bengals haven't done this yet belt. Now they have done it. I'm cool. They traded away their 1st round draft pick and acquired Dexter Lawrence. And that was honestly that was the flag that planted on Mount Everest. That's all I needed to see. Joe Burrow restructuring is just, I guess, surplus bonus for that. But again, man, I keep asking myself, what is it going to ultimately do in the end for you this year if you're trying to win now? Those guys that we're talking about getting contract extensions for and whatnot that's currently on our roster and under contract for another year, we're cool, man. Like, y'all still got to go out there and earn it. Minus DJ Turner.
There we go. Well, you know what? The number one thing that Joe Burrow has to do this year is just stay healthy. Stay healthy.
Absolutely.
Be yourself, 9, and that's really all we can ask for, because that's the guy that makes the engine go. So if Joe Burrow's out there and he's playing well, man, we can do whatever with that contract. Just as long as that guy's out there playing football for the Cincinnati Bengals, you know, we will be pretty good. We'll talk, and on different episodes throughout the summer, we'll talk about the pressure and everything else. There's so much time to collapse the amount of pressure throughout the course of the summer and everything else. You know, all the media outlets are going to be talking about it, how they reversed it to the Bengals pressure on Joe Burrow. But Joe Burrow has a lot of pressure on himself coming up in this offseason, but we'll talk about that on another episode. On this forefront, though, let's talk about this briefly before we get into a debate about two great Bengals receivers. Let's talk about some Bengals home opponents this year. They play a couple of NFC South opponents on top of their normal AFC North opponents, some AFC South opponents as well, and, you know, a couple of opponents here or there that are sprinkled in through their schedule. Obviously, they've got the Ravens, they've got the Browns, they've got the Steelers as normal. They take on the Bucks, they take on the Saints, they take on the Jaguars again at home. They take on the Tennessee Titans, and then they welcome in the Kansas City Chiefs. Justin, I bring this up because, one, the NFL schedule is going to be coming out in roughly 2 weeks, I would say, if you put the elongated version onto it, because, again, they don't even know when the schedule's coming out. They don't. That's their whole entire thing. There's a lot of things that go into the NFL schedule, but whatever. I'll save the nerding stuff for another time. But over the last 2 seasons, the Bengals, they went 6-11 combined at home in 2024 and 2025. The 2 previous years before that, in 2022 and 2023, the Bengals were a combined 12-4. What's the problem with playing at home over the last couple of years for Cincinnati?
Oh, man, that defense has just been putrid. And I don't know what it is. It just feels like we just didn't got the right guys that had that hunger and fire in them from the Super Bowl year to year after that, and before Joe Burrow hurt his wrist. Yeah. I just feel like that the Bengals just lost their energy and their luster. And then when the roster started being a little bit bereft of talent, you're starting to see that guys just wasn't good anymore. And that comes a lot with it. We thought the law of averages was going to kick in, thinking that after 2024, the Bengals defense can't be that bad. And then, well, they were that bad. In fact, they were probably worse. And we just feel like that we needed to have a true look in the mirror and reevaluate it, because, yeah, you're absolutely right. It is just, their home record is disgusting. Now, last year, you can always throw the argument that if Joe Burrow didn't hurt his toe or whatever, maybe that home record would have been improved, but the defense was still bad, even with Joe Burrow still on the field. But in 2024, it was really bad, and that's the season I got my eye on the most, just because that season Joe Burrow was there the whole time, and they started out 0-4 at home, and I just kept thinking to myself, that is just unacceptable. You went 0-4. I remember I was at attendance to the game against the Philadelphia Eagles, eventual Super Bowl champions. They had the white tiger jersey. They actually hung with them pretty well and actually had the lead. Yeah. And I thought, like, bro, wait, they gonna kick their ass. But they just weren't clutch. They weren't making those big time plays that they needed to in those clutch moments. Evan McPherson missing field goals at home. The defense, like I said, just can't stop a nosebleed on the ground, let alone the pass. But on the ground, they just can't stop the run. Yeah, I just don't know what it is. Usually when you're at home, that you're tough to beat at home. Even the Cleveland Browns are tough to beat at home when you play them there. And you could talk about their record or whatnot, but, man, I do not want to be in a do-or-die situation. My playoff life is on the line, and I got to go up to Cleveland and play by that mistake by the lake, because that, for some reason, the wind dynamics or whatnot in that stadium is rough. Same with Pittsburgh. Same with Baltimore. Now, the Bengals did win on the road at Thanksgiving this past season and did beat the Ravens. Yeah. But it's just like, it's not really parlaying until the effect that people feel here. But I didn't feel that way in 2022. I feel like in 2022, when you had to come to our house, you going to be ready for a dogfight, or your ass is going home packing, like with bloody mouth and everything, because we're going to beat you up.
Exactly.
But this past 2 years, man, I can't really explain it outside of what I already had mentioned. We just hope and pray that the fire is back in the bellies of these guys, and they truly start to look at that and look at themselves with mental toughness. Like, man, these guys can't see me. I got Joe Burrow on the one side, and now with Dexter Lawrence being the heart and soul and the guy that is in the anchor of your defensive line, I'm hoping that raises the floor of everybody else. I think you were just missing too many big dogs, man. That wore that C on that chest real proud.
Yep.
And when enough of those guys leave the locker room, you start to see that the vibe start to bleed a lot.
It's starting off strong being the big thing again. The Bengals haven't won a home opener since their Super Bowl season in 2025. Actually, they won in 2025, don't get me wrong. But at the same time, we did lose Joe Burrow in that game. So obviously it was deflating. They lost in 2024 to the Patriots in the opener, and that was just ugly. They lost to the Ravens in week 2 when Burrow was hurt. And, you know, we almost came back and won, but they threw a pick to Geno Stone in the third quarter, which just set the entire mood off. And 2022, that ridiculous game where, you know, obviously so many turnovers, missed field goal by Evan McPherson, that extra point and a field goal, all that stuff. So again, there's just been a lot of weird things to start, but I'm going to turn one way, and I think this is truly the biggest thing. Third down. Third down, when you're the home team, the crowd gets into it. Your defense should be into it as well. They had a premier pass rusher, obviously. We've mentioned his name before. I don't really feel like mentioning his name now. But again, you go back to the thing of, you know what, we know this guy's going to line up on one side. So it's like, all right, whatever. We'll just annex the side, and then and our quarterback stands there and makes a play. But this year on third down, hopefully with the big-time addition of sexy Dexter Lawrence, you go on ahead, and you're looking at a guy that's able to rush up the middle, and then it opens up things for the other guys to literally pin their ears back and just get after the quarterback and make a play. It adds energy. It adds excitement. It adds, you know, a lot of loudness even in that stadium that it just seems like it has been lacking, because, you know, third down's the money down, and all the other teams in our division have premier pass rushers that are like, yep, it's his time. We know it's time to eat. So again, hopefully the Bengals are in that situation this year with a guy in the middle that's able to bully things up, and then it could be anybody's time to eat going into third down and trying to get that offense off the field. Now, pivoting onto this one, we're gonna take a little throwback. All right. So we were talking about this before we hopped on the show, and obviously, you get into the off season, there's so many things that happen in the, March, April, and everything else, but there's so many things that don't happen in May, June, and everything else. But man, just going back and looking at some of the numbers, some of the guys that we watched growing up and everything. I mean, you're talking about AJ Green versus Chad Johnson. I mean, what a comparison we're going to look at here. And Justin, just, give me something about Chad, watching him play the game, that just got you excited as a younger Bengals fan.
Well, see, Chad Johnson really ushered in the era of Bengals fans from my generation. So I'm in the millennial age generation, and the 05 Bengals was really the calling card for a lot of people that's my age, around my age range, because they remember that 05 season as the pillar season that got it all started. Yep. Well, who was the enforcer that got it started? It was really Chad Johnson. Yes, they can talk about Carson Palmer at quarterback and everything, like the quarterback is the most important position on the field. Yes, to have it stabilized, but who was the driver of the offense? That was Chad. I truly felt like if Chad wasn't on the field, that offense was always out of sync. I also felt like that Chad was the explosive playmaker that helped elevate the rest of the receiving room. He's the reason why TJ Hushmanzada was able to make a name for himself and eventually make Pro Bowl honors as well, too. He is the reason why we was able to see the explosiveness of the downfield threat of what Chris Henry ultimately became. Yes, Chris Henry was kind of already like that at West Virginia coming out of college, but he wasn't the one-trick pony when you lined him up with Chad. And that was one of the things that I saw value that Chad had brought during the early 2000s era, because he was up there and he will never get credit for this, honestly, but he really helped diversify the wide receiver position from a route tree standpoint. You don't really have a lot of route running technicians that came in the league prior to Chad. Maybe, you got guys like Marvin Harrison that came to the league in 96. You got guys like probably Torrey Holt that will get a little bit more cachet to their names and whatnot. Those guys are explosive in their own rights, and I feel like that there are things they can do probably a little bit better than Chad. But route running extraordinaire, dog, that was all Chad. Chad will take routes. He will freelance them, the most simplest routes too. And he will freelance them to precision, and his feet was just so damn quick to the point it was really tough to stop. And I remember he even talked about it. He also would tell a DB what his route would be and challenge him to see if he'll stop it. Now, I think over the years of what dimmed Chad's light, it was that his antics became a little bit bigger than his play. When Father Time did catch up to him, that was where he wore a lot of people out, to the point where people forgot how good he was or minimized how great he was. But man, that stretch during the early 2000s, I remember witnessing it live, and I was just absolutely impressed. And I remember when he was off the field, I was hoping that is he going to get back on the field, because we need him bad. That's how I felt, and I viewed Chad Johnson.
I couldn't explain it better. And that's when I started to get into Bengals football, and I was, younger in that time frame, and seeing that. And I mean, the first Bengals jersey that I owned was a Chad Johnson jersey before it turned to Ocho Cinco. So again, I mean, crazy. Him, Palmer, what they were doing there, and back in 05 and in that time frame was spectacular. But even, for me, it was really the AJ Green front of things, of where I can consciously remember so much, I mean, this is a guy in AJ Green that was picked over Julio Jones in the 2011 NFL draft, the first receiver taken off the board. Obviously, when you look back, you're like, man, the guys like Julio, like Antonio Brown, Calvin Johnson during that time frame. Those are the greats in that era. And DeAndre Hopkins at that. You think about all those guys, but man, AJ Green was just a silent assassin. I remember Dan Horde said it one time on a radio broadcast for the Bengals that AJ Green has that Baryshnikov type footwork. It was eloquent. It was beautiful. He was built like an Olympic athlete, but was just so smooth at the high point of a catch, the fluidity of route running. He wouldn't burn you off the line, but AJ was just, so smooth with it in terms of his technical route running at that. And it was awesome to see that once he got into the league, he wasn't a guy that would just open his mouth and just start talking and stuff. Him and Chad were complete opposites in that regard. But man, they would both ball out. They would both produce numbers. And to see the growth from AJ Green from year 1 to year 2 going into year 3, which is the year we're talking about for AJ, I mean, those years kind of blend together a little bit, but at the same time, they were all great seasons. So, I mean, just seeing what he was able to do back in that time frame, Justin, just spectacular. And obviously, I wish the Bengals would have won a playoff game for him.
Seriously, because at the end of the day, for both guys, if the Bengals have had any sort of iota of inkling of postseason success, like we've seen in the Burrow, Jamar Chase era so far, you were talking about these guys in a whole different light. Hall of Fame nods. I mean, both guys should get Hall of Fame nods regardless, but they're always going to have that blanket coverage over them regarding Hall of Fame votes, just because they did not have successful postseason advances. And that's not their faults. It's the fault that the teams were not successful. And Andrew Whitworth actually said it too during that 2011 and 2015 run that featured AJ Green at the height of his powers for the most part. If the Bengals would have just made one more move that would show that, hey, we're willing to do this, take a risk here, maybe they would have been able to see that. And, quarterback does play along the lines with it, because Andy Dalton was not good in the postseason too. But 2013, AJ Green, 05, Chad, we'll go into it as well. But AJ Green overall body of work was absolutely just remarkable. And it's funny because, you bring up, he was the first receiver taken in his draft class, and not one Bengal fan or not one person bats an eye at it, because, yes, Julio Jones have a better longevity career between him and AJ Green, but we've been pretty damn happy with how AJ Green's performance has. Now, there could be a little bit things he could have done better. like the physical toughness and being more strong hands on the routes, kind of like how you see with Dez Bryant back during that time as well too.
Yeah.
But AJ Green, the smoothness. I remember Joe Hayden characterized his route running in his just play is just smooth, and he can just get from 0 to 60 real fast, just down the field. And you just like, damn, how the hell he get that wide open?
Yeah.
I said that he was like he was Randy Moss with the footwork of Chad Johnson in a different way. That's how I've always viewed him. And it was a pleasure to watch both of them and consciously remember both of them during those eras for me personally.
100%. And I mean, just to see the ability of AJ Green, the flash of Chad Johnson. We'll throw up this graphic here. I mean, look, you look at 05 Chad, 97 catches, 1,432 yards, 9 touchdowns, first team All-Pro selection, and a Pro Bowl. On the flip side, AJ Green, 98 catches, 1,426 yards, 11 touchdowns, second team All-Pro, and a Pro Bowl selection. It's actually funny. I put in parentheses about where those ranks were in the NFL, and it's crazy how the game truly changed just even over the course of 8 years, as the fact that, you know, in receptions, you're still around that 100 reception mark. You're going to be in that top 5 to 7 category. You know, 1,400 yards, you're still in that top 5 or so. Touchdowns, that's the big thing I'm looking at here, is the fact of 9 touchdowns from Chad compared to 11 touchdowns for AJ, and they're right around the same spot. I get the stats aren't everything. They really aren't. But then your first team All-Pro and your second team All-Pro, that's the other place that you look at as well. You know, that type of stuff that Chad was doing, you know, that wasn't happening a whole lot in 05. He was consistently doing that over the course of 5 years. And AJ, in his situation, it happened as though that Antonio Brown came onto the scene really in 2013 as that guy, and Julio Jones as well. And Megatron was coming off of the record-breaking season back in 2012. And Dez Bryant, Larry Fitzgerald still doing it. So again, you know, I think the clutter right there of those great guys, you know, ultimately pushed AJ's rankings down. It obviously didn't hold his production down, but what Chad did right there, I mean, that pretty much rolled a red carpet open in terms of this 21st century applaud of great Bengals receivers that we see today.
Absolutely. And quite frankly, seeing you list off the receivers that was in AJ Green's class in his era directly, it does really make me wish that he was a little bit more vocal during his time.
Yeah.
And that he wasn't just a silent assassin, but man, you just go out there and just talk some trash to your opponents, your DBs or whatnot. Sometimes I don't even care if you call somebody out in the media or whatnot. Be that captain, not necessarily being cocky, but show that confidence, that vibrato or whatnot, because people are going to pay attention to that. Yeah. When we talk about the Bengals offense of the early 2010s decade, the first name that came up was AJ Green. It was not Andy Dalton, you know? So when he knows that he is that dude, and I always will appreciate his humility, his humbleness, and he's still like that even in his retirement. Just, hey, I just go about my business. I just go to work. But guys like him, and I'll even bring up Geno Atkins too, I just wish those guys had a little bit of an edge in their attitudes about them when they were on the field, while still being great guys off the field, don't get me wrong. But because I feel like that would have helped propel them up the ascension ladder just a little bit. I feel like that if guys would have if those guys would have took a stranglehold on some of those locker room problems and whatnot, I feel like that the team would have responded to that. Instead of they were looking towards guys like Marvin Lewis and Andy Dalton, and you know, those are not really vocally iconic guys. So but yeah, man, you can't really deny the numbers there. Obviously, they speak well for themselves. But I also think that AJ Green's numbers, I'm speaking with him specifically because I know what Chad's numbers are, but AJ Green's numbers specifically, I feel like that they could have not been suppressed if he just would have vocalized himself a little bit more. He was a captain of the team that year, like he truly was. But I just feel like that because he was quiet, he kind of flew under the radar a bit, and that's unfortunate. And he let his play do the talking, which is great. But sometimes, man, go ahead and test some of those boundaries a little bit.
Yeah, especially when you're playing in big games in the playoffs and your team is winning, you're getting more of that, you know, publicity and everything else. But good pub at that. And like you mentioned, I mean, both of those Bengals teams, I would say, had their locker room problems and everything else that came with it. I get it. But at the same time, you knew that Chad talked like a microphone was in front of his face all day, every day.
All the
AJ
time.
Green acted as though that he didn't know what a microphone was, and that's not a bad thing either. But again, I mean, they're just two completely different people in terms of the character side. They're two different receivers, in the way they're built and the way that they play the game of football. But man, they gave us a lot of great memories over the course of time.
Yeah, for sure. I love them both, man, but we got to debate them.
Shoot. All right. Well, I want to stand by my guy AJ in terms of the fact that, I mean, this guy made right from the jump. He was Pro Bowl. It didn't matter. I mean, he went 7 straight Pro Bowls, 2-time All-Pro. I think with the quarterback that he had in Andy Dalton, who he pretty much had to carry. You even said it yourself that when you think about the Bengals offense, you think of AJ Green first. You don't think of Andy Dalton. Andy obviously had to get him the football and everything else, and Andy's numbers look better because of AJ Green. And there were also some times where Andy forced the ball to AJ Green, and some things didn't look good on that as well. But I don't know. I think that AJ being able to just transition so smoothly into the game, into the National Football League, really sticks with me there. I know that the ending of the time with the Bengals wasn't the way that he would have liked it to be in terms of play on the field, but I would roll with AJ. I don't know. We never even talked about who we're deciding or who we were defending on before the show, so this is new to me.
So when it comes to overall body of work from a receiver standpoint, and that's just even the totality of careers, I will go with AJ Green over Chad, surprisingly, even though Chad came first, even though he was during my era in time. But I just felt like that from a diversified skill set and the wider range of skills that AJ was able to provide, I just feel like that, man, he was just that damn good that you don't really hear about. It's like really people are truly forgetting what kind of value that he brought to those teams. And yes, his smooth, seamless transition of just being productive on a year-to-year basis, that you confuse production that he did with one season and think that it was a part of another season. Like, I almost forgot during 2013, I can't even recall if AJ Green ever put up 200 yards, but I know he did in 2014. I know he did it in 2015. I also know he did it in 2012 as well, too, if I'm not mistaken. Ed Johnson, I know that he did it a 200-yard game against the Steelers at home, but you'll think that was a part of this best season that he had in 2013, because that was when he was really, from a number standpoint, may not even tell the full story, but like value standpoint to the team. He was just up at the top of the leaderboard. He had all the respect from every single peer, even the greatest DBs in that time. But me personally, from the debate of the particular season, I got to go with Chad's 05 season.
Okay.
And that is going to be a little bit shocking to say this, even though I like AJ Green more as a player.
Yeah.
But Chad's 05 year, I still reverberates a lot of what the Bengals even do to this day, because it still sets the foundation that if you ain't got that dude at that number one to run the X, I don't know if you're going to have a functional offense in the Bengals organization's lens.
Yeah.
I feel like Chad is the one that truly took that to heights of new powers. Guys before him didn't do as much value for him. And yes, there was even guys like Carl Pickens, got Darnay Scott, and I don't know if he was a true number one, Chris Collinsworth or whatnot. But they never did what Chad did. The problem with Chad is, as I mentioned before, his answers got bigger than his play as the years went on. But 05, I remember telling myself all the time, he's the one that is the engine that makes this thing go. Carson Palmer, yes, may have been a number one overall pick, but if it wasn't for Chad, Carson Palmer wouldn't have had the production that he would have had. And Carson Palmer needed a guy like Chad to really increase his value as a franchise quarterback. It wasn't the other way around. People like to confuse that. Now, Chad will probably tell you, I needed a guy like Carson. Sure, but I know what my ass told me during that time. That season, again, it's very polarizing for a reason. And that reason why I was polarizing, the first thing that comes in people's mind was Chad. He was the one that feared DBs. Their division records during those particular seasons were a little bit different. The Bengals in 05 went 5-1 in the AFC North that year. And in 2013, I believe the Bengals record in that division, now I think they went 3-3.
3-3, yep.
So AJ Green was productive against all three teams in the AFC North. But in the AFC North into 05 that year, Chad Johnson basically just cooked Baltimore back and forth, left and right, took them to the woodshed and the blender. And same thing with Cleveland. Pittsburgh was really the one team that he really didn't have the answer to. But I felt like that the 05 version of that year, Chad still had his catches, but he didn't get in the end zone as much because guys like TJ Hushmanzada had to do the tough, gritty catching for them. Like those are always dogfight games. And that was a dogfight year between them and the Steelers, where you had to start to really respect the Bengals challenging the Steelers for like that rivalry of the division. Before that, man, Pittsburgh was not looking at the Bengals as an AFC North rival. They was always looking at Baltimore. But the Bengals became that because of Chad. And the Ravens stopped talking all that trash to the Bengals because of Chad. Even when you had guys like Ray Lewis, I remember that 05 Baltimore team. They weren't a great team with Kyle Bowler. I think they went 4-12.
Yeah.
But Ray Lewis, they had obviously Ed Reed. We already know about those guys in the holding attitude. But they had Samari Rowe. They had Chris McAllister as their corners. They even had Deion Sanders during that time. Bart Scott, Terrell Suggs. You think about that overall totality of Baltimore's defense, Chad ate that whole secondary up like it was nothing. It was like lunch food for him. Whereas Pittsburgh still struggled against Baltimore. You know, they actually lost the game to him.
Yeah.
So I think that Chad's impact value on the 05 team reaches a higher ceiling that I feel like better than what AJ Green's value of on that 2013 Bengals team. And I think that a cast of characters that the AJ Green had around him in 2013 was better than the cast of characters around him, because the Bengals defense was only ranked like 22 in defense that year. Yeah. The offense and the passing attack really carried them through. If there's one thing that I wish that the Bengals in 05 could have been, I wish they could have been more battle tested going against better teams, like better quarterbacks. Yeah. They lost against Peyton Manning in a shootout that year. They didn't even see Tom Brady. Yeah. But I didn't feel confident that if they were to go toe-to-toe with those guys on a consistent basis, they did go toe-to-toe and lost against the Colts that year.
Yeah.
But if they went toe-to-toe with Brady and Manning and even Breeze, because I know he was with the Chargers during that time, I just feel like that the Bengals weren't there yet. They were only battle-tested because they came out with a 5-1 record in that division. Whereas the Bengals in 2013, they damn near beat everybody. They beat everybody at home. They beat Aaron Rodgers. Yeah. They beat Tom Brady. They beat Big Ben. They beat
undefeated at home into the playoffs.
8-0 at home until that stinker of the 09 wild or 2013 wild card round.
Yeah.
We're not going to talk about it.
Yeah. That game is fresh out of my mind. But again, I mean, that's the two ways you look at it. I mean, you look at the transcendence of Chad Johnson getting the Bengals up to a status, or you look at the smooth transition of a guy like AJ Green, who just kept his value growing as time went on. That's the great thing about it. I mean, I say a debate, but at the same time, I mean, I think it's just paying the flowers to both of those guys for their great careers in Cincinnati Bengals. But I think there's one thing that we can agree upon before we end this episode, that the movement that has gone on from the Bengals having a great receiver over this entire 21st century of Chad Johnson for those 10 years, and then it moves AJ Green for those 10 years. I think we can both agree that the guy that is at the helm right now, who wears number one, is number one as the best receiver in this entire franchise, and that is Ja'Marr Chase.
I absolutely agree. And I've dreamed of having a guy of a weapon of Jamar's caliber for years. And that's even during AJ Green's tenure. I just felt like I love AJ Green, but man, the dynamic approach that Ja'Marr brings, I feel like that we have not had that ever in franchise history. So yes, 100% agree.
I think that opens up, as we are closing out the show, ironically, that the next debate that we should do, and we can talk about this behind the scenes, but guess what? How about supporting cast members on the offense? That would be a fun one to see. Justin, any final thoughts before we get on out of here?
Nah, this was a fun show. More offseason talk is obviously going to transpire. The Bengals are going to be beginning their rookie mini camp and having some vets report and stuff like that. But dude, we're in the peak of the offseason now.
Yeah.
So the draft is come and gone. I'm intrigued and can't wait until the NFL schedule comes and we can just do our little circle sheet of wins, losses, and whatnot. We'll see how many primetime games we get. We already know that a game against the Ravens is going to be notched in primetime, hopefully at home this time. I think that we have enough ammunition for that to be at home this time with them getting Trey Hendrickson now, but we'll see. I'm intrigued to review that because that's next up on the slate.
100%. That being said, that's Justin Lacey. I'm Chase Younts. Give us both follows on Twitter. Like this video, subscribe, comment, do whatever you can. We appreciate all the support that has gone on. That's the Cut to the Chase Bengals Blitz. We'll see you guys next time.